Spokane is a great place to buy a home. I've lived here my whole life and I genuinely believe that. But I've picked 5 topics today that I think could catch a buyer totally off guard and could cost them thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars if they're not paying attention to these things. They're all completely avoidable if you know what to look for. But I'm going to walk you through all 5 in this video. This isn't meant to scare you or anything like that. Just information that I think every buyer deserves to know before they spend over $500,000 on a home here in the Spokane area. And I'm making this video just to be an informed buyer, not to scare you off or anything like that. And I want you to know that everything covered today is data-based, publicly available, or documented market conditions, because every area, every location, and every home has a buyer that's right for it. But this is about making sure you go in with eyes wide open. So here are 5 things that every Spokane buyer should understand before they make an offer. So the first thing I want to bring up, and luckily we don't have a lot of these in the Spokane region, is natural disaster type events. So being flood zone and fire risk here in the Spokane area. I've been getting a lot of questions about fire insurance, especially from my California clients. And yes, it's becoming more of a problem here in our area, but not as bad as what I've heard some people are dealing with in California. Things like $20,000 a year fire insurance specific policies. I have not come across that in Spokane. I think other parts of Washington have experienced that a little bit. I've seen things like requirements to cut trees back or branches away from the house or cut down specific trees. I have heard of there being insurance companies that require like sprinklers to be set on the a rooftop sprinkler system that can water the house if there was a fire. But most of the time at this point, we're seeing some insurance providers dropping people or backing out altogether. But at this point, we are still seeing enough insurance providers providing reasonable coverage that it is not a huge matter. I mean, I have somebody that I was working with that was on 10 acres, very densely treed, and her first insurance provider raised her premium to about $4,500 per year. And this was like 10 acres of very dense treed land. But then she went and shopped it around and found somebody else that was willing to give her the same coverage for $1,600. So there's still just enough competition, enough movement in the Spokane market that it's not happening so much like it is in California specifically. Then the other thing is flood risk. Now, flood risk is pretty slim here, but we do have the Latah Creek and the Spokane River that run through this area, and we have higher water tables in specific areas. And so there is a tool that you can use to determine if a property that you're looking at has a potential flood risk or a potential, it's in a potential wetland that could cause issue when it comes to maybe building a home or getting insurance on that property in the future. Because I would say the biggest issue with this is buying vacant land that you don't do enough due diligence on. And so you can go to Scout. Scout is the Spokane County GIS website where you can look up any property and look up their tax information, sales history. But there's also a tool where you can come up here, go down to critical areas and check flood hazard and wetlands. And then you can look at any of the wetlands, designated wetlands in the Spokane region. So you'll notice that out in the West Plains, there's specifically quite a bit of designated wetlands out there. Because if I shut this off, it kind of looks like there's a bunch of ponds everywhere. But if I shut this off, it goes away. I mean, there's a flood zone in the Turnbull area. But in terms of designated wetlands, they're not just like ponds or anything, but I think they are maybe high water table areas more specifically. So that's just something to look out for if you're out shopping in that West Plains, Cheney, Medical Lake area. It might be very possible that some land you buy has a designated wetland. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't buy that property, but you just need to know that the building is positioned far enough away from that designated wetland, and you're not going to have any potential issue with building in the future. We had a client that was about to buy some vacant land out in this region, and then they discovered that there was a wetland which would have forced the house to be in this one corner of the property, and then would have made them like next door neighbors with the house right next to them. And they were buying like 10 acres, and they didn't want to just like be basically like 6 to 10 feet away from the house next to them when they're buying 10 acres. So those are the things to look out for in terms of natural issues here in the Spokane area. So the next thing to consider is potential appreciation over the next 5 to 10 years of the property and area that you're buying into. So I have pulled the data of about 15 little micro communities here in the Spokane Metro between 2017 and 2025. And it shows you some very interesting information on which areas areas appreciated more than others. Now, I'm going to say that this has nothing to do with location in terms of livability, safety, neighborhoods, anything like that. It's purely just the drawn out information from the last 9 years. And what I think this and I think this could be drawn in two different perspectives, because one side may say, well, this one didn't appreciate very well, but and maybe that means it's not a good place to live. But I'd actually think you'd be surprised at which areas appreciated the least over that period of time. And then the other perspective of that is, well, these areas overappreciated and maybe are not as good of a buy now, and the ones that are have underappreciated the market maybe are a good buy right now. So let's jump into this. So looking at this graphic on the screen, you can see that the city of Spokane in 2017 was an average of 188,000, and now in 2025 it got up to about 389,000, which was 107% appreciation, or about 8.7% compounded annually. The Spokane Valley was 215 to 455, which was 112% or 8.3% annually. Colbert appreciated by 122%, but Liberty Lake appreciated by 60%. But they saw a massive swing. But in 2022, the peak high was 635 and has settled down to 502. This is a small data set. So even though this is the median number, it is that middle number, it's still such a small data set that could be swinging quite significantly, but it was one of the lower appreciating markets. We also had Meade going from 294 to 454 with a 55% appreciation. And again, one of those markets that kind of swinged really heavy during the COVID era and now has come back. And then Millwood saw a 47% price appreciation from 164,000 to 240,000. Now, again, this is a very thin market, a very small sample size. So that number I think is probably maybe a little bit skewed as well, but it's just interesting to look at. So like I said, some of those higher appreciation markets, you might believe that it's maybe gone up too far and is overvalued, while others might say it's established and that demand is justified and it's where you want to be long term. And then the slower appreciation markets, some buyers might think it as undervalued and a good buying opportunity, but others might interpret it as the market signaling that there's an underlying issue for demand in this area. So at the end of the day, both are probably right, but I just think it's important for you to look at historical trends before you commit long term, and especially identifying which areas do you feel like you are going to be able to sell your home in 7 to 10 years from now and get your down payment back and hopefully have made some money on top of that. And before I get into the next three, if you're in the process of researching a move to Spokane, or you're already here and keeping an eye on the market, I just love it if you would hit subscribe and give this video a like. I put out content like this every single week with as much honest and real data as I can. And so subscribing will just make sure you don't miss anything if something changes in the market that you need to know about. Let's jump into item number 3 that I want you to be aware of. So this third one, I think you just need to make sure you're paying attention to, and I want to give you a few key points on how to use it to your advantage. And if you're a seller, how buyers are interpreting your listing. But this is days on market. Now, days on market tells you a lot of things. It'll tell you how fast a market is moving and if that home has activity on it and things like that. And I created a tool just for you guys that I'm excited to show you about, so stick around for that. But we can see by the current data that 27% of the homes on the market right now have been on the market for more than 90 days, and 35% of homes have reduced their price by a median of $15,000 with an average closer to $25,000. So there's really this split market right now where you have about a quarter of the homes acting as fresh listings. 23% have been on the market for less than 14 days. Then you have this section of the market that's been on for over 90 days at this point. So that makes up about half the market. Old stale listings and then brand new listings. And then you have about 50% of the market that sits between 14 days and 90 days. So as you're observing the market and in these different price brackets and different price reductions, things like that, there's a few questions you just want to ask yourself and ask your agent to look over. So the first one would be, has that price been reduced from its original list price? And is the current price now actually in line with what comparable homes have sold for recently? So actually asking your realtor to run their own CMA and say, what would you have listed the house for if you were to list it? Then seeing, did this home come back onto the market? Was it a deal that fell apart? If so, why? And what did that inspection reveal? I know that I had a listing just go back on the market and the buyer didn't negotiate anything. They just canceled the agreement and went back on. I asked them what was wrong with the house and why they wouldn't negotiate. Our seller was very reasonable and they basically gave no reason at all, which just ultimately means that that buyer just got cold feet and wasn't ready to move forward. So sometimes there's a big reason, sometimes there's no reason at all. And right now as a buyer, you have to balance the numbers with emotional attachment, because the numbers are an important thing and you want to get the home for the best deal possible within reason. We've worked with some people that do believe it's like the 2008 market right now and are offering what we would maybe consider insulting offers at this point. And the interesting thing about them is that they will submit an offer that is a lowball offer, and the seller is going to counter most likely, and then that buyer will just walk away without even continuing that conversation, which is kind of interesting. We want to continue that conversation and see if there's something we can find a way to work that out. We have a deal that we're trying to sign around right now where our buyer came in 5% under the asking price on a $915,000 house, so a substantial reduction. The seller was only ready to take maybe 1% off of the price. We stayed firm, and then that seller is ultimately coming down about 4% on the price. So even though we were firm in our numbers, and my buyers are emotionally attached to this home, they really do want it, they allowed themselves to stay patient and see where the seller was willing to settle. So there's a game there where you want to actually love the home and be into the deal, but firm in the numbers that you believe in. You just want to make sure that you're careful not to be so emotionally attached to the home that you're willing to just put yourself at risk and in a weird situation where you're waiving all your contingencies in a market where it's kind of unnecessary to do that. We are seeing a bit more activity right now, some multiple offer situations, and I did write an appraisal waiver recently in an offer because it did get so competitive and our buyers just wanted the home so bad. So it really is just so different for every single person, and we're willing to meet you where you're at and what is specific for your situation. So to get to the tool that I built for you guys, I built what I'm calling the Spokane Listing Pulse GPT. And so you can actually go to SpokaneListingPulse.com, and I hope it's working by now, but that will take you to a custom GPT that I built. And what you can do is actually take this GPT and take any home on Zillow that you're interested in. So we'll go over to Zillow right now. We will pick a random house. We'll take this one right here. And what you're going to do is you're going to go to the GPT and you're going to say, I want to analyze an address to purchase. And it's going to say, let's break it down. Which one are you looking at? So it's going to ask you for the address. You're going to copy that. You're going to paste it in there. And then you're going to go down and you're going to copy the days, the views, and the saves. And you're going to paste that in there. And now, based on the days on market, the views it's getting, and the saves, this GPT can tell you what you should, how you should approach this property. So you hit enter, it's going to run the numbers for you. So this one is getting an just under 250 views per day, which Zillow says is very strong visibility, and that's the gold standard. You want to be at about 250 views per day. It's also getting about 12 and a half views saves per day, which is extremely strong demand, well above the 10-day benchmark that Zillow says you should be aiming for. So as a buyer, you need to know that this home has a strong likelihood of multiple offers. So you should look at submitting a fast, clean offer, including tight deadlines, potentially waiving contingencies and things like that. But if we go back to Zillow and we attempt to find a home that's been on the market for a while, I think I can go look for days on market, to be a little further out. So let's say 90 days, apply. So we find a property that's been on the market a little bit longer, and we'll see how it approaches that one. So we're going to tell it to analyze this address. We're going to put the address in. We're going to copy the days, views, and saves again, put it in here. Boom. And then it's going to say, okay, here's the breakdown for this one. All right, well, it's only getting 59 views a day and 5 saves per day. So this one would suggest that there's moderate competition. It may not be flooded with buyers, but you're likely not alone. This would suggest that there's probably other buyers looking at it. And so there's an opportunity to submit a good offer, but probably a little bit of negotiation. So this will just give you some quick tips if you are interested in a home and you're curious about what the activity is like, and if you could potentially submit maybe a lower offer, or if you should expect to submit a higher offer based on that home's activity on Zillow. So I hope you find it helpful. Like I said, so it's just Spokane Listing Pulse GPT, free for you to use, and I hope that you find it helpful. Okay, the fourth thing I want to talk about, and I'm a little nervous to talk about it, but it's working with a small builder. And I think I'm going to get flamed in the comments for this, but I believe small builders are needed. It's great for our local economy and for our housing stock, and many of them are exceptional. And so I'm really just not trying to make a hit piece on small builders or anything like that. I've had experience working with some great small builders, but I've also had some bad experiences working with small builders because they don't have the infrastructure that a large construction company has. The biggest thing that happens is not during the build and the build itself, it's what happens in the year afterwards, because large national or regional builders have large warranty departments, documented systems, dedicated staff, really a machine behind the process to handle things that come up within the first year or two after that home was built. But if it's a small builder, they may have built a very beautiful home, but they don't know how to manage any post-closing warranty processes. And I do think that that is something you really need to consider if you're going to work with a small builder. So my clients bought from a small builder. It was quality craftsmanship. It was a great home. Everything felt good. But in the first year, the home settled significantly, which led to some large drywall cracks. The doors wouldn't close because the frames were no longer level. And there was a handful of other things. And there was just issue with getting the builder to come back out and fix all of those things in a timely fashion. There really wasn't a lot of urgency, and it just took over 6 months for the whole thing to get resolved because there was just not a team in place. There's not a lot of finances. Like, they're building the house, selling it, and expecting to walk away with their money, and now they have to come in and spend a bunch more money to fix these huge issues that came up. So I think you should look out for these 4 things before signing with any builder. First, I want you to ask for addresses of homes they've completed in the last 2 or 3 years. Drive by, see if you can knock on the door and ask the homeowners for a review, and ask them about the post-closing experience as well. Because I think if you can get people that they've worked with tell you the truth, then that would be very important. You also want to read the warranty document before you sign the offer or anything, because it can be, there's not really a contingency for the warranty. Like, you're going to go through it and you want to know what that warranty is ahead of time. Because if you go under contract and you see that the warranty isn't that great, there's really not a way for you to back out of the agreement because of that in most cases. So you just want to understand what the process is for submitting a warranty claim, the expectations on response timelines, and seeing kind of what their documented process is. If they don't have a system in place, I would be kind of nervous about moving forward with that. And then you just want to double check that you have an agent or a real estate attorney reviewing the purchase agreement. If it's written by the builder's attorney, because a lot of builders will use their own purchase and sale, you just want to make sure that you are protected as well as you need to be and understand what you're agreeing to. So like I said, super not anti-small builder, but there are things you need to know about when working with a small builder to just verify that it's going to be a good process for you. And then the 5th thing here is just something you got to be cognizant of as you're shopping for a home. I specifically see it happen more in those lower price point buyers, is buying a home where your house is either on a major street or backs up to a major street. And the reason I'm talking about this mostly is for resale. You may not actually care too much about the constant traffic, but when it comes to selling your home, it will take significantly longer to sell your home, and it's going to sell at a comparable discount to any of the homes just a block away or on the interior side of your block because of that traffic noise. I was showing a home today to a buyer the house wasn't even really against a main arterial. It was kind of a main road coming in and out of the Colbert neighborhood. And just the white noise to the Highway 395, which was about a quarter mile away, and then you have cars just kind of driving right behind the fence, was enough of a turnoff, even though it was priced probably $40,000 below any of the other homes that we looked at. She would be willing to pay significantly more just to not live with that situation. And that's something that we see all the time. And so it's just something to consider if you own a home on a major street or you are looking at potentially buying one. It's just something to consider as you're making this investment and asking yourself, is it worth to actually buy a house on a main street? So all 5 of the things we went over are knowable before you make an offer. None of them require any special access or insider information. You're just taking the time to ask the right questions or reach out to somebody that has those answers. And so if you're looking for somebody that can work with you and be honest with you and get all this information that you are looking for, and you're making a move into, out of, or across Spokane, then me and my team would love to help you out. You can call, text, email anytime using the information on the screen or in the description, or you can book a call directly with me using the links below. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.